Okay, so picture this. You're driving along miles from nowhere and, oh, flat tire. But instead of that sinking feeling, you
Yeah.
pull out this gadget like it's the size of a water bottle, and you just confidently inflate your tire.
Wow.
That's the promise of this thing called the Airmoto tire inflator.
Mhm.
You sent us a ton of Amazon reviews for it, and we're going to deep dive into what people are actually saying. Is it all hype, or is this little inflator actually worth your money?
Well, just the sheer volume of reviews is pretty interesting, right? It seems like everyone's really into these portable tire inflators these days. There's definitely a demand for, convenient ways to keep your tires topped off.
For sure. And one thing that jumps out from the reviews is just how easy people say this Airmoto is to use. A lot of folks are raving about the preset modes for different tire types. Just select car, motorcycle, whatever you're
Yeah.
inflating, and it just takes care of the pressure for you. Plus, it's got that auto shut off, so you don't have to worry about overinflating. Sounds pretty foolproof.
Yeah, that ease of use is a huge selling point, I think. Especially for people who aren't that comfortable with, using traditional air compressors. It's all about making tire maintenance more accessible.
Makes sense. And speaking of accessibility, everyone's talking how portable this thing is. Reviewers are saying it's like the size of a water bottle. Small enough to throw in your glove compartment or your backpack, no problem. But here's the question. Does that small size mean that it's sacrificing power?
Yeah, right? That's the trade-off, isn't it? You want it to be portable, but you need it to actually work. When it comes to inflation speed, the reviews are kind of mixed.
Yeah, it seems like for topping off tires or dealing with a slow leak, most people are pretty happy with the Airmoto. But if you've got a totally flat tire, you might be waiting a while. One reviewer even said it took them like 15 minutes to fill a car tire.
15 minutes, that's a long time. You'd definitely spend less time at a gas station air pump. But on the other hand, being able to take care of a flat tire yourself anywhere, anytime, that's a pretty big deal for some people.
I can see that. Convenience often comes with a compromise. And speaking of compromises, battery life seems to be another big theme in these reviews. It sounds like you can probably handle 1 or 2 tires on a single charge. But if you need to inflate all 4, you'll be plugging it back in.
There's one review here from someone who topped off their SUV tires. They said 3 tires, no problem, but they had to recharge to finish the last one. So it gives you a pretty realistic idea of what that battery can actually handle. But here's where it gets interesting. One person mentioned that the battery performance dropped a lot when the temperature got below 43 degrees. Now that's a concern if you live in a colder climate.
That's a good point. How common is that issue if cold weather really impacts the battery that much? That could be a deal breaker for a lot of people. But, okay, battery aside, what about the actual build quality of this thing? Some people had some thoughts on that.
Right. A few people mentioned concerns about the durability, especially since it's made of plastic. They were worried about it holding up over time, especially with frequent use.
Yeah, and they found the air hose a little short and stiff, which could make it kind of awkward to use, especially for those inner tire valves.
Even though some people mentioned those drawbacks, there's a really consistent theme convenience. A lot of reviewers really appreciated having this small portable inflator on hand for emergencies or, quick top-offs. It's about having that peace of mind.
Yeah, it's like better to have it and not need it than need it and not have it right.
Right.
Especially with something as important as, being able to inflate a tire. Some reviewers actually specifically mentioned the screw-on valve attachment as being like a big plus. They said it's so much easier to use than those like fiddly clip-on ones
Yeah.
that you see on some other inflators.
Oh, that's a good point. Having a really secure connection to the valve is important. You don't want to be messing around with a leaky connection when you've already got a flat tire. It sounds like the Airmoto's design really took that into consideration. But let's get back to that issue of build quality. How much of a concern is that plastic construction really?
Well, it's tough to say from just these reviews how well it'll actually hold up over time. Some people were worried about it feeling a bit flimsy, but other people didn't say anything about having any problems with it. Maybe it just depends on how often you're using it. And you know how roughly you're treating it. I guess if you're just using it for like occasional top-offs, it might not be that big of a deal.
Right. If you're planning on using it every day, you might want to think about a model with a more, heavy-duty build, even if it means giving up some of that portability. It's all about figuring out what your priorities are. Like, what's more important to you? Having something super compact or having something that feels really durable?
You got to weigh those trade-offs.
Yeah.
But even with, those concerns about the build and the battery life and the inflation speed, people seem to be pretty happy with the Airmoto overall.
Okay.
That convenience factor really seems to be winning them over.
And that makes sense, This isn't trying to be a heavy-duty air compressor that you keep in your garage. It's more like a handy little tool to have in your car for those everyday situations or those, unexpected emergencies out on the road.
Exactly. Okay, so let's zoom out for a second. We've been focused on cars here, but the Airmoto is actually marketed for all kinds of inflatables. Do you think it might be even better suited for smaller things, like bike tires or, sports balls?
That's a good question. You'd think it would be more efficient with those smaller items. Since they don't need as much air, it might even be a little bit faster to inflate them compared to like a car tire.
Yeah, that makes sense. It's giving me ideas now. I'm wondering, what other things might people think about when they're choosing a portable tire inflator? Like, what are the other options out there? How does this stack up against the competition?
Well, there are definitely a ton of options. Some of them really prioritize power and speed above everything else. Others might be even more compact than the Airmoto, but maybe they don't have as many features. It really just depends on what you're looking for.
So it's not just about the Airmoto itself. It's about, understanding your own needs and priorities. Do you need something super powerful?
hmm
Or is convenience more important? Do you live somewhere where that cold weather battery issue would be a problem? These are all things to consider.
Absolutely. And don't forget about safety. A flat tire can be dangerous,
Hmm.
especially if it happens at night or in a remote area. Having a reliable way to inflate your tire and get back on a road is so important.
So true. Thinking about it that way, the Airmoto starts to look pretty good. Even with its limitations, it seems like it could give you some real peace of mind.
It's all about weighing the pros and cons. Portability, ease of use, those are big pluses, but you have to keep in mind that battery life, inflation speed, and maybe even durability could be potential downsides.
All right, so there you have it, our deep dive into the Airmoto tire inflator. We've covered a lot of ground here, from ease of use to battery life to build quality, all based on what real users are saying in those Amazon reviews. Hopefully you've got a much clearer picture now of what this little gadget is all about.
We've explored the good, the bad, and the just plain interesting. Armed with this knowledge, you can confidently navigate the world of portable tire inflators and figure out if the Airmoto is the right fit for you. Or maybe you'll decide to check out some of the alternatives.
Exactly. But the deep dive doesn't stop here.
We've got a final thought for you to chew on. As you continue your research, we've talked a lot about, the Airmoto and its features. But what about you? Like, what kind of driving do you do? Do you do a lot of long road trips? Or is it mostly city driving? That could really change how useful something like this would be for you.
Oh, yeah, for sure. And, think about where you live, too. If you're somewhere with big temperature swings, that cold weather battery thing we were talking about,
Yeah.
that could be a deal breaker.
It's all about finding the right tool for the job. Like, no
Yeah.
point in getting something super powerful if you only need to top off your tires once in a while.
Right, exactly. And if those occasional top-offs are all you really need, maybe that slower inflation speed isn't a big deal. You're giving up a little speed, but you're getting a lot of portability. Plus, some people might be fine with, those durability concerns. If it means having something this small and convenient, it really comes down to personal preference.
It does. But no matter what kind of inflator you choose, remember that a flat tire can be more than just annoying. It can be dangerous.
Yeah, especially if you're somewhere remote or if it happens at night. Having a way to inflate your tire and get back on the road safely, that's really important.
Absolutely. So when you're thinking about your options, think about those worst-case scenarios. Would the Airmoto give you that peace of mind?
Well, that's our deep dive into the Airmoto tire inflator. We talked about the good, the bad, the maybe not so bad, all based on those Amazon reviews you sent us.
Hopefully we've given you a better idea of this little gadget, its strengths, its weaknesses.
Yeah.
And you know whether it might be right for you.
Maybe you're ready to click buy now, or maybe you're thinking, maybe I should look at something else. Either way, you're going into it with way more info than you had before.
And that's what matters. We gave you the info. Now you make the decision.
Happy inflating